Billionaire realized his fiancée's nurse was the wife he left 5 years ago, and she has his twin. Are they mine? The question came out like a whisper, but it landed like a grenade in the quiet courtyard behind St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. Eric Collins stood under a bare magnolia tree, his $4,000 suit wrinkled from sitting in a hospital chair all day, his hands trembling for the first time in his adult life. And the woman standing in front of him, the woman in lavender scrubs who had spent the last 3 days pretending he was a stranger, looked at him with eyes that carried 5 years of fury and heartbreak and survival. "They are mine," Nicole said. Her voice did not waver. Her hands did not shake. She had spent 5 years learning how to hold herself together in front of men who did not deserve to see her fall apart. "I carried them. I birthed them alone in a hospital where I knew no one. I fed them and rocked them through fevers and read them stories and taught them to walk and talk and tie their shoes. I taught them how to be brave in a world that had already proven it would let them down. They are mine, Eric. Every breath, every milestone, every sleepless night, mine. That is not what I asked. It is the only answer that matters." She turned to walk away, and he caught her wrist. Gently, barely a touch, but she stopped like he had pressed a blade to her skin. "Their names," he said. His voice cracked on the second word. "Please, just tell me their names." Something in her face shifted. Not broke, cracked, the way ice cracks when warmth reaches it from below. Unstoppable and terrifying. "Jonah and Mira," she whispered. "Jonah looks like you. Mira has your stubbornness. They are 4.5 years old. They are everything good in my life, and they do not know you exist." Then she pulled free and walked back inside, and Eric Collins, the man who controlled boardrooms and billion-dollar deals in the direction of entire markets, stood under that magnolia tree while the night pressed down on him and realized that the most important thing in his life had been happening without him for nearly 5 years. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand why that moment in the courtyard shattered a man who thought he was unbreakable, you need to know how he became the kind of person who could walk away from a woman like Nicole Harmon. You need to understand what he chose, what he lost, and what it cost the woman who survived his cowardice to build a life from the rubble he left behind. So let me take you back, not to the courtyard, not to the hospital room. Let me take you back to the very beginning, to the moment two people met, and everything that followed became inevitable. This is a story about a billionaire who had everything except the one thing money cannot buy, a woman who lost everything except the one thing no one could take from her, and 2 children who deserved better than the choices their parents made. It starts with rain. The evening Eric Collins met Nicole Harmon, the sky over downtown was doing its best impression of a disaster. Rain fell in sheets so thick the buildings across the street looked like watercolor paintings someone had smeared with a wet hand. Eric was 30 years old, already wealthy, not yet the billionaire he would become, but well on his way. He wore a custom suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. He was at the Langham Hotel for a medical fundraiser, not because he cared about medicine. Eric Collins did not care about many things beyond his company, his ambitions, and the carefully curated image he projected to a world that measured men by their net worth. He was there because his business partner had insisted the networking would be valuable, and Eric understood networking the way sharks understand water. It was the medium in which he thrived. The elevator broke between floors, not dramatically, no shuddering halt or flickering lights. It simply stopped, the way things do when the universe decides you need to be somewhere you had not planned to be. Eric pressed the emergency button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. He pulled out his phone to call his assistant, already mentally composing the complaint he would file with hotel management, already calculating the opportunities he was missing at the gala above. That is when the woman in the corner spoke. "It is an elevator, not a hostage crisis. Just sit down and wait like a normal person." He turned. She was sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, wearing hospital scrubs and sneakers that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy ponytail. She had a takeout container balanced on her knees and was eating lo mein with plastic chopsticks like being trapped in an elevator was the most ordinary thing in the world. "I am sorry," Eric said, still holding his phone like a weapon. "Do you work here?" "At the hospital 3 blocks over. I was catering a side gig for this event. Took the wrong elevator bank on my break." She gestured with a chopstick. "You can sit, or you can stand there looking important. Either way, that phone is not going to fix the elevator." He sat, Not because she told him to, but because something about her directness caught him off guard. People did not speak to Eric Collins like he was ordinary. People deferred, accommodated, agreed. This woman looked at him like he was just another person stuck in a box, which, objectively, he was. They talked for 47 minutes. He learned her name was Nicole Harmon. She was a second-year nurse. She worked 12-hour shifts and catered events on weekends to pay off student loans. She lived in a studio apartment with a radiator that only worked on days it felt like cooperating. He told her none of this was interesting. She told him none of what he did was interesting either. "You move money from one column to another and call it success," she said, not with cruelty but with the casual honesty of someone who had no reason to flatter him. "I held a 9-year-old boy's hand while he died last Tuesday. He had leukemia. His name was Gabriel, and every night for 3 weeks he asked me to read him Harry Potter. Not because he loved the books, because he wanted someone to sit with him in the dark and make the monsters feel smaller. That is interesting. That is real. What you do is just math with more zeros." No one had ever spoken to him like that. No one had ever reduced his empire to math with more zeros and made it sound accurate rather than insulting. No one had ever made him feel simultaneously seen and stripped bare in the same sentence. When the elevator started again, he asked for her number. "Why?" she said. "Because I have not had a real conversation in 3 years, and I would like to have another one." She studied him for a moment. Then she took his hand, turned it palm up, and wrote her number on his skin with a pen from her scrub pocket. The ink smudged slightly. He did not wash it off for 2 days. Their courtship was not a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real. Nicole did not care about Eric's money. She did not care about his penthouse or his car collection, or the invitations to galas where people drank champagne and pretended to solve problems they had no intention of actually addressing. She cared about whether he was honest, whether he listened, whether he could sit still long enough to watch a sunset without checking his phone. He could not at first, but she made him want to learn. They dated for a year. She challenged everything about him, not his intelligence or his ambition, but the hollow spaces underneath, the places where a real person should have been, but where Eric had installed a machine instead, a machine that produced profit, generated admiration, and felt nothing. "You are performing a life," she told him one night. They were on her apartment floor because she did not own a couch. She had made pasta that was objectively terrible, and they were eating it anyway because she had made it, and that mattered more than taste. "You have all the props, the suits, the cars, the corner office, but you are not actually living. You are just running a very convincing simulation." "And what would living look like?" he asked. "Scary," she said. "Vulnerable, uncertain, like jumping without knowing if the net is there. I do not like uncertainty. I know. That is the problem." He married her anyway, against the advice of his business partner, who called Nicole a liability, against the instincts of every self-protective impulse he had spent 30 years cultivating. He married her in a small ceremony because she insisted. No press, no spectacle, just them and a justice of the peace and the terrifying beautiful promise that he would try to become someone worthy of her. For 2 years he tried, and for 2 years he mostly succeeded. They were happy, not in the way movies portray happiness, all orchestral swells and perfect lighting. They were happy in the way that real people are happy, messily, imperfectly, with arguments about laundry and compromises about holidays and the slow daily work of choosing each other, even when choosing yourself would have been easier. Nicole kept nursing. Eric kept building his empire. They existed in parallel orbits that intersected at night when they were both too tired to be anything but honest. Those intersections were where the real marriage lived. In the dark, without pretense, 2 people who had chosen each other saying the things they could not say in daylight. But orbits that run parallel eventually drift. The physics of ambition and exhaustion are merciless. Eric worked longer hours. Nicole worked opposite shifts. They started communicating through sticky notes on the refrigerator. Picked up milk. Board meeting Thursday. Miss you. Love you. The notes got shorter. The miss you disappeared first. Then the love you became automatic, written from muscle memory rather than feeling. Nicole noticed the drift before Eric did. She always noticed things before he did, because she paid attention to people the way he paid attention to spreadsheets, with precision and devotion, and the quiet understanding that the details were where the truth lived. She tried to talk to him about it. He deflected. She tried again. He said she was overthinking. She tried a third time, and he told her he was tired, and could they please discuss this another time. And the another time never came because there was always a deal closing or a flight to catch or a meeting that could not be rescheduled. The distance grew. Not dramatically, not with fights or slammed doors. It grew the way mold grows in walls you never inspect. Silently, invisibly, destroying the structure from within while the surface looks perfectly fine. And then Debra Langford walked into his life, and the structure collapsed. Debra was not a villain. I need you to understand that because this story is not about villains. It is about humans making choices and living with the consequences. Debra Langford was a talented interior designer from a prominent family. She was hired by Eric's company to redesign a flagship hotel project, and she was exactly what she appeared to be. Beautiful, intelligent, uncomplicated. That last quality was the dangerous one. Debra did not challenge Eric. She did not question his priorities or demand vulnerability or ask him to examine the hollow spaces inside himself. She laughed at his jokes without analyzing them. She accepted his schedule without complaint. She existed in his life the way a perfectly designed room exists, aesthetically pleasing, comfortable, requiring nothing from the person standing in it. Nicole required everything. Nicole required truth, presence, growth, discomfort. Nicole required him to be a person rather than a performance. And Eric, who had spent 2 years trying and sometimes failing to meet that requirement, found himself gravitating toward the woman who asked nothing of him. It was not physical, not at first. It was emotional. Late-night texts about the project that became late-night texts about life. Inside jokes that excluded Nicole by design. Confessions shared with Debra that should have been shared with his wife. The architecture of an affair built not with bodies but with intimacy redirected, with the emotional energy that belonged in one relationship being spent in another. Nicole found the texts on a Tuesday evening. She was not snooping. Eric had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered. A message appeared on the screen. She saw the name. She saw the words. She read enough to understand that her husband was building a life with another woman right beside the life he was supposed to be building with her. She did not scream. She did not throw the phone. She did not confront him with theatrical fury. She sat at the kitchen table and waited for him to finish his shower and come downstairs, and when he did, hair damp, humming a song she did not recognize, she asked one question. "Do you want to be here?" Eric stopped humming. He looked at her face and saw something worse than anger. He saw clarity, the kind of clarity that comes when someone has already done the math and is just waiting for you to confirm the answer they already know. "Nicole," he started, "do not explain. Do not defend. Do not tell me it is not what it looks like, because I have spent 10 years as a nurse and I know the difference between a wound that can heal and one that cannot. So I am asking you one question, and I need you to answer it honestly for the first time in months. Do you want to be here? In this marriage? With me?" The silence lasted 6 seconds. Nicole counted them. She would remember the number for years. "I do not know," Eric said. It was the most honest thing he had said in months. It was also the most devastating. Nicole nodded once, slowly, the way you nod when a doctor confirms the diagnosis you already suspected. "Then go," she said, "but go knowing that you are not leaving because I am not enough. You are leaving because I am too much. I require you to be real, and you would rather be comfortable. That is your choice, but do not ever, for the rest of your life, pretend it was mine." Eric packed a suitcase. He moved through their bedroom collecting items while Nicole stood in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, watching him disassemble their life with the same efficiency he brought to corporate restructuring. He took clothes, toiletries, the laptop he kept on the nightstand. He did not take the framed photo from their wedding that sat on the dresser. He did not take the book of poetry she had given him on their first anniversary, the one with the inscription that read, "For the man who is learning to feel. I love the version of you that is emerging." He left those behind, because taking them would mean acknowledging what they represented, and Eric Collins was not capable of that acknowledgement. Not yet. Not for years. He paused at the front door. He looked at Nicole. She looked at him. And in that look was every conversation they had ever had, and every conversation they would never have, compressed into a single moment of eye contact that lasted 3 seconds and contained an entire marriage. He walked out. Nicole locked the door behind him. She stood in the hallway of their apartment, his keys still warm on the hook where he had left them, and pressed her back against the wall. She slid down to the floor. She sat on the cold tile and wrapped her arms around her knees. She did not cry. Not yet. The crying would come later, in waves. For months, in the shower where no one could hear, in the car in the hospital parking garage between shifts, in the middle of the night when the apartment felt so empty it seemed to echo with the sound of everything she had lost. But in that moment, sitting on the floor, Nicole did not cry because she was holding something. Not grief, not anger, a secret. There was a pregnancy test in her purse. Positive. She had found out that morning. She had spent all day planning how to tell him. She was going to make his favorite dinner. She was going to put the test in a small box. She was going to watch his face transform from confusion to understanding to joy, and she was going to hold that moment in her memory forever. Instead, she sat on the kitchen floor with a positive pregnancy test in her purse and a husband walking toward a car that would take him to a woman who would never ask him to be more than he already was. He did not know. He did not know that night, and he did not know for 5 years because Nicole Harmon made a choice in that moment on the kitchen floor. She chose to survive. She chose to protect the life growing inside her from a man who had proven he could not be trusted with precious things. She chose to disappear, and she did. Within 3 weeks, Nicole was gone. She filed for divorce through an attorney, requesting nothing except the legal dissolution of the marriage. No alimony, no settlement, no contact. Eric's lawyer called it the cleanest divorce he had ever processed. Eric told himself this meant Nicole was fine. Strong women were always fine, right? He signed the papers and moved on with his life and never once asked himself whether fine and surviving were the same thing. They are not. Nicole moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, where her older sister Renata lived. Renata Voss was a high school history teacher. Divorced. Practical. The kind of woman who solved problems with lists and determination and the occasional well-placed profanity. When Nicole showed up at her door with 2 suitcases, a positive pregnancy test, and the hollow eyes of someone who had just survived an explosion, Renata asked no questions. She opened the door. She made tea. She pulled out the sleeper sofa. "You are staying," Renata said. Not asked. Said, "I am pregnant," Nicole replied. "I know. I could tell the moment I saw your face." "How far along?" 10 weeks, maybe 11. "And him?" "Does not know. Will not know." Renata studied her sister for a long moment. She was not the kind of woman who pushed. She was the kind of woman who waited until you were ready and then helped you carry whatever you had been holding alone. "Okay," Renata said. "Then we figure this out. Together." They figured it out. But figuring it out is a phrase that makes the process sound far simpler and cleaner than it was. The pregnancy was brutal. Nicole was carrying twins, a complication she discovered at her 12-week ultrasound when the technician pointed to 2 heartbeats on the screen and said, "Congratulations," with the cheerful obliviousness of someone delivering news that would completely restructure another person's life. Twins. 2 babies. 2 of everything. 2 car seats, 2 cribs, 2 sets of diapers, 2 mouths to feed on a single nurse's salary that was already stretched thin enough to see through. Nicole worked until her 7th month. She modified her nursing duties, trading 12-hour floor shifts for desk work and patient intake, hiding her growing belly under progressively larger scrubs until the belly refused to be hidden. Her supervisor at Charlotte General was understanding. Her co-workers covered shifts when she needed rest. The nursing community, Nicole had learned, took care of its own in ways the rest of the world could learn from. The birth happened on a Thursday in February. 31 hours of labor. Renata held her hand through every contraction, every moment of terror, every second when Nicole looked at the ceiling of that delivery room and wondered if she was strong enough for what came next. Jonah came first, screaming, furious, fighting his way into the world with clenched fists and a scrunched face that looked so exactly like Eric that Nicole laughed through her tears. He announced his existence the way his father had probably announced his. Loudly, aggressively, demanding the room pay attention. Mira came 20 minutes later. Quiet, observant, eyes open and searching, taking everything in before deciding whether the world deserved her noise. She did not cry immediately. She looked at Nicole with an expression that seemed impossibly like assessment, like she was evaluating her mother and deciding whether to trust her. Nicole held them both, one in each arm, 2 impossibly small humans who carried the genetic fingerprint of a man who did not know they existed, and the fierce survival instinct of the woman who had chosen to bring them into the world alone. She whispered a promise into the space between their tiny bodies. I will never let anyone make you feel like you were not chosen. You were chosen. By me. Every single day. For the rest of my life. You were chosen. Now before I continue with what happened next, with the 5 years of sacrifice and strength, and the silent war Nicole waged against poverty and exhaustion, and the persistent ache of raising 2 children who looked like the man who broke her heart, I need to talk to you directly for a moment. If you are still here, if Nicole's story has grabbed you by the chest and refused to let go, then you understand something important. You understand that this is not just a story about a billionaire and a nurse. This is a story about what happens when someone chooses comfort over commitment, and the person they leave behind refuses to be destroyed by it. This channel, Mr. Dawson Stories, exists for exactly this kind of story. Stories about real people navigating impossible situations. Stories about survival and redemption, and the messy, complicated work of becoming better than the worst thing that ever happened to you. If you are new here, subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell. Because I promise you, what happens in the second half of this story, when Eric finally comes face to face with the consequences of his cowardice, when Nicole has to decide whether walls built for protection have become a prison, when 2 4-year-old children ask questions that no adult can answer without breaking, you will not want to miss a single second. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. And like this video right now so that more people can find their way to it. Now, let me tell you about the 5 years Nicole spent becoming someone who did not need anyone, and why that strength, the very thing that saved her, became the thing she had to learn to let go of. The first year was the hardest, not because of the physical demands, though those were crushing, not because of the financial pressure, though that was relentless. The first year was the hardest because of the loneliness. Nicole had Renata. She had co-workers who brought casseroles and offered to babysit. She had the stubborn, grinding determination that had gotten her through nursing school and would get her through this. But none of that filled the space that existed at 3 a.m, when both babies were crying, and the apartment was dark, and there was no one on the other side of the bed, and no one coming through the door, and no one to look at her and say, "You are doing an incredible job, and I am here, and we will figure this out together." She was alone. Completely, fundamentally, architecturally alone. And the loneliness was not a feeling. It was a presence. It sat in the room with her like another person, taking up space, breathing her air, reminding her with every exhale that she had been left. Maternity leave lasted 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Because the country Nicole lived in treated motherhood like an inconvenience rather than the most demanding job a human being could perform. She was back at work before her body had fully healed, before the fog of sleep deprivation had lifted, before she had figured out the logistics of feeding 2 infants on a schedule that did not align with hospital shift rotations. She pumped breast milk in supply closets. She called Renata between patients to check on the babies. She charted medications and monitored vitals and comforted frightened patients with steady hands and a calm voice, while her mind ran a constant parallel calculation of ounces consumed and diapers changed in hours until she could hold her children again. There were moments she almost broke. Not moments of drama or collapse, but quiet moments of erosion. Standing in the hospital bathroom at 2 a.m, leaning against the sink, too tired to cry but too heartbroken not to. Looking at her reflection and not recognizing the woman staring back. That woman had dark circles under her eyes and chapped lips and hair that had not been properly washed in 4 days, and she was the strongest person Nicole had ever seen, and she hated her. Hated her for being strong because strong meant alone, and alone meant surviving. And surviving meant waking up tomorrow and doing all of it again. She almost called Eric 3 times during those 5 years. This is something she would never tell anyone, not Renata, not a therapist, not anyone. 3 times she picked up her phone and pulled up his number and let her thumb hover over the call button. The first time was when Jonah was 8 months old and developed pneumonia. Nicole sat in the emergency room at 2 a.m, holding her son against her chest, listening to his labored breathing, watching the monitors and understanding exactly what the numbers meant because she was a nurse and knowing was worse than not knowing. She wanted to call Eric, not for money, not for rescue. She wanted to call him because her baby was sick and she was terrified, and there should have been someone else in that chair, someone else's hand on Jonah's back, someone else's heart breaking alongside hers. She did not call. The second time was when Mira said her first word, "Mama." 11 months old, sitting in a high chair, mashing banana between her fingers, and she looked up at Nicole with those huge dark eyes and said it like she had been saving it, practicing it, waiting for exactly the right moment. "Mama." And the joy that flooded Nicole's body was immediately followed by a grief so sharp it stole her breath because there was no one to share it with, no one to grab by the arm and say, "Did you hear that? Did you hear what she just said? Our daughter just said her first word." She wanted to call Eric. She wanted him to know that his daughter was extraordinary. She did not call. The third time was on what would have been their wedding anniversary, 2 years after he left. Nicole was sitting in Renata's kitchen after the twins were asleep, drinking wine she could not really afford, staring at the wall, and the loneliness was so heavy that night, so physical, so suffocating, that she felt like she was drowning in a room with no water. She picked up her phone. She dialed his number from memory, because she had never been able to delete it from her brain no matter how many times she deleted it from her contacts. The phone rang once. She hung up, because calling Eric would have meant admitting she needed him. And needing Eric Collins had almost killed her once. She would not let it happen again. So, she put the phone down. She finished her wine. She went to bed. She woke up the next morning and made oatmeal for 2 toddlers and went to work and saved 3 lives that shift and came home and gave baths and read stories and fell asleep on the nursery floor because she was too tired to walk to her own bed. That was survival, not the glamorous, cinematic version, the real one, the one that smells like formula and antiseptic and cheap laundry detergent, the one that has no soundtrack or soft lighting or wise narration, just a woman and 2 children, and the relentless, unglamorous, heroic work of making it through another day. Years 2 through 5 were different, not easier. Different. Nicole specialized in orthopedic rehabilitation. The hours were more predictable. The pay was better. The skills she developed were always in demand, which meant job security, which meant stability, which meant the twins would never know the terror of their mother lying awake at night doing math that did not add up. The twins grew. They became people. Not just babies, not just toddlers, but actual human beings with personalities and opinions and the kind of questions that no parent is ever fully prepared to answer. Jonah was analytical, careful, a boy who took things apart to understand how they worked. Remote controls, flashlights, once, memorably, the toaster, which resulted in a trip to urgent care that Nicole handled with professional calm and internal hysteria. He approached the world like an engineer, which he probably got from Eric, though Nicole refused to think about that too often. He asked hard questions. That was the thing about Jonah. He did not accept surface answers. "Why do we not have a dad?" he asked one evening. He was 3.5. They were eating dinner, macaroni and cheese from a box because Nicole had worked a double shift, and creativity was a luxury she could not afford that night. Nicole set down her fork. She had practiced this answer. She had rehearsed it in the shower, in the car, in the quiet moments before sleep when she prepared for the conversations she knew were coming. "Your dad is alive," she said carefully, "but he was not able to be here with us. That is not about you. It is not because you are not wonderful, because you are the most wonderful person I know. It is about choices he made that had nothing to do with you. Did he not want us? He did not know about you, baby. He left before I knew you were coming." Jonah processed this with visible concentration. His face did the thing it always did when he was thinking hard. His eyebrows pulled together, and his mouth went slightly to one side. It was Eric's face, though Nicole had trained herself not to see it. "That is sad," Jonah said finally. "For him, I mean, because we are pretty great." Nicole laughed because the alternative was sobbing into macaroni and cheese. "You are incredibly great," she agreed. Mira was different from her brother in every way that mattered. Where Jonah was cautious, Mira was fire. She drew constantly. Sketchbooks piled in every room of the apartment, filled with dragons and castles and elaborate worlds where the colors were always bright and no one ever left. She told Nicole one evening, "I only draw places where everybody stays. Nobody leaves in my pictures, because leaving is the worst thing." Nicole held her daughter and breathed through the pain and did not cry because she had gotten very good at not crying in front of her children. She saved the crying for the shower, where the water masked the sound and the steam masked the evidence. Nicole's professional reputation grew during those years. She became the nurse you requested when recovery seemed impossible. Patient, skilled, relentless in her belief that healing was always possible, even when the patient had given up. She sat with frightened people and held their hands and told them the truth about what lay ahead. Not the comfortable truth, but the real truth, and then she helped them survive it. The irony was not lost on her. She healed everyone except herself. When the twins were 4, Nicole received a job offer she could not refuse. Head of Orthopedic Nursing Rehabilitation at St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. Better title, better pay, better hours, better schools for the twins and the surrounding neighborhoods. There was one problem. St. Augustine Memorial was in the same city where Eric Collins lived. The same city she had fled 5 years earlier with 2 suitcases and a broken heart and a secret growing inside her. Renata raised the concern immediately. She was practical like that. "You know he lives there," Renata said. They were sitting on Renata's porch while the twins played in the yard. "Are you sure about this?" "It is a city of 4 million people," Nicole replied. "The chances of running into him are essentially 0. And this position, Renata, this is everything I have been working toward. The salary alone would mean I could finally put money into college funds. I could stop choosing between groceries and soccer cleats. And if you do run into him, then I will handle it the way I handle everything, professionally." Renata gave her a look that said she did not believe that for a second but loved Nicole too much to argue. Nicole took the job. She moved the twins to a modest duplex in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a park within walking distance. She started at St. Augustine Memorial on a Monday. She was brilliant. Within weeks, her patients were recovering faster, her staff respected her, and the department head told her she was the best hire they had made in a decade. She built a life. Again. From scratch. Again. In a city that held the ghost of everything she had lost, she built something solid and safe and entirely her own. She told herself she was not afraid. She told herself the past was a country she had emigrated from and would never return to. She told herself a lot of things during those years. Most of them were true. Some of them were armor disguised as truth. And one of them, the big one, the one she whispered to herself in the dark on nights when the loneliness pressed too close, was a lie she needed to believe in order to keep functioning. "I do not need anyone. I am complete on my own. This is enough." It was not enough, but it was all she had. And Nicole Harmon had learned to build kingdoms from scraps. Then one Tuesday afternoon, 4 months into her tenure at St. Augustine Memorial, the nursing agency assigned her to a private patient recovering from knee reconstruction surgery in the hospital's luxury suite on the 7th floor. The patient's name was Debra Langford. Her emergency contact in Fiancée was listed as Eric Collins. Nicole stared at the assignment sheet for 11 seconds. She counted them the way she counted everything that mattered. Then she closed her eyes, took one breath, opened them, and walked toward room 714. Because Nicole Harmon did not run. She had done enough running for one lifetime. Whatever waited behind that door, she would face it the way she faced everything. Standing up, steady hands, armor on. She just did not expect the armor to crack the moment he walked through the door and said her name like a prayer he had forgotten he knew. The first day was the worst. Not because anything dramatic happened. The opposite. Nothing happened. And the nothing was unbearable. Nicole adjusted Debra Langford's IV drip with hands that did not shake. She checked vitals with precision that came from 12 years of practice. She introduced herself as Nicole Harmon using her maiden name, the name she had reclaimed the day the divorce papers were finalized. The name that belonged to the woman who existed before Eric Collins and the woman who had survived after him. Nicole Harmon, your recovery nurse. I will be managing your rehabilitation for the next several weeks. Debra smiled. She had a warm smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Nicole noticed this and hated herself for noticing because it would have been easier if Debra were cold. If Debra were cruel or shallow or visibly unworthy of Eric's affection. Instead, Debra Langford was exactly the kind of woman you wanted to like. Gracious, intelligent, genuinely kind. She asked Nicole about her experience. She asked about the rehabilitation timeline. She listened to the answers with the attentiveness of someone who actually cared about the information rather than just performing interest. This was the woman Eric had chosen, not instead of Nicole. After Nicole. But the distinction felt academic when you were standing in the same room, adjusting her pillow, monitoring her pain levels, playing the role of caretaker for the woman your ex-husband was planning to marry. Eric arrived at 6 that evening. Nicole heard his footsteps in the hallway before he entered. She had always been able to identify his walk, measured, deliberate, the cadence of a man who approached every room like he was about to acquire it. The door opened. Nicole had her back to it. She was recording Debra's medication schedule on the chart. She heard Debra say his name. She heard the rustle of imported flowers being set on the bedside table. She heard the kiss he pressed to Debra's forehead. And then she turned around. 5 years, 1,827 days, 43,848 hours. Nicole had not done the math on purpose. The math had done itself, running in the background of her mind the way hospital monitors run in the background of a patient's room. Constant, unavoidable, measuring the distance between then and now. Eric Collins looked at her, and the color drained from his face so completely that for a moment Nicole thought he might need medical attention. The flowers in his hand trembled. His jaw went slack. His eyes, those sharp dark eyes that missed nothing in a boardroom and had missed everything that mattered in a marriage, widened with the kind of shock that cannot be performed. "Nicole," he said. Just her name. Just the grenade. Debra looked between them with the casual curiosity of someone watching an interaction she had no reason to find alarming. "Do you two know each other?" The silence lasted 3 heartbeats. Nicole filled it before Eric could detonate it. "Mr. Collins's company donated to the hospital's pediatric wing last year. I attended the dedication ceremony. He gave a lovely speech. The lie was seamless, delivered with the same steady competence Nicole brought to every aspect of her professional life. She had learned to lie the way she had learned to suture wounds. Quickly, cleanly, with minimal scarring to the surface, even if the damage underneath was extensive. "Right," Eric managed. "The dedication. I remember." He did not remember because it had not happened, but he understood what Nicole was doing. She was building a wall between their past and this room. She was establishing the rules of engagement. "We are strangers. We have no history. You will not destroy what I have built." He accepted the rules because he had no right to challenge them. That first evening was an exercise in controlled agony. Nicole performed her duties with textbook precision. She walked Debra through gentle range of motion exercises for her knee. She adjusted the elevation of the surgical leg. She administered pain medication at the correct intervals and documented everything with the meticulous attention to detail that had made her one of the most respected rehabilitation nurses in the hospital. Eric sat in the corner chair and pretended to review documents on his tablet. He did not read a single word. Every molecule of his attention was focused on the woman in lavender scrubs who was touching Debra's shoulder with the same gentle reassurance she had once used to touch his. He cataloged the changes. She was thinner. The angles of her shoulders were sharper, as though life had carved away everything that was not essential. Her hair was darker, or maybe it was just pulled back more severely. There were fine lines at the corners of her eyes that had not been there 5 years ago. Not age lines, exhaustion lines, the kind that come from years of sleeping less than your body needs and worrying more than your mind can sustain. But her hands were the same. Steady, sure, moving with the quiet authority of someone who had spent over a decade healing people and had never once doubted her ability to do it. Those hands had held his face. Those hands had written their wedding vows. Those hands had locked the door behind him the night he left. Nicole made one slip during that first shift, small, almost invisible. When she reached across Debra to adjust the pillow, the overhead light caught her left hand. Her ring finger was bare, but there was a faint line where a ring had been. Not his ring. He knew that because his ring had been platinum and would not have left a tan line that subtle. This was something different. A band she had worn for years. A ring she had given herself, perhaps. A promise to herself that she would never again let someone else determine her worth. Eric noticed the tan line. Nicole caught him looking. Their eyes met for exactly 1 second. In that second, an entire war was fought. Accusations and defenses and 5 years of silence compressed into a single glance that said everything and resolved nothing. Then Nicole looked away and continued adjusting the pillow, and the moment passed, and the room returned to its performance of normalcy. Debra noticed nothing, or so Nicole believed. The second day followed the same pattern. Nicole arrived at 7 in the morning. She conducted her assessment. She guided Debra through rehabilitation exercises that were slightly more demanding than the day before, building toward mobility in careful increments. She was patient and encouraging and exactly the kind of nurse you would want managing your recovery. Eric arrived at noon. He brought lunch for Debra from a restaurant Nicole recognized. It had been their place, hers and Eric's, during the first year of their marriage, a small Italian spot where the owner knew their names and always saved the corner booth. Eric probably did not even realize the cruelty of the coincidence, or maybe he did. Maybe it was not a coincidence at all. Maybe some part of his subconscious was reaching toward a past he could not access through the walls Nicole had built. He stayed for 2 hours. During those 2 hours, Nicole moved around the room with the practiced invisibility of someone who had learned that the best way to survive proximity to a bomb was to pretend it was furniture. She checked monitors. She updated charts. She answered Debra's questions about rehabilitation milestones. She did not look at Eric. She did not address him unless the medical situation required it. She was a ghost with a stethoscope, present but untouchable. But something shifted on day 3. Something small that would become seismic. Debra was perceptive, more perceptive than Nicole had given her credit for, which was a mistake born of the assumption that the woman Eric chose after her must be somehow less observant than the woman he had chosen before. Debra Langford had not built a successful design career by failing to notice details. She noticed the way rooms were arranged. She noticed when colors clashed. She noticed when spaces contained tension that the occupants were pretending did not exist. She noticed the way Eric watched Nicole. It was not obvious. He was careful. But Debra had spent 2 years studying this man, learning his rhythms, reading his silences the way Nicole had once read them. She knew when he was distracted. She knew when his attention was divided. And for 3 days, his attention had been focused on their nurse with an intensity that went beyond casual observation. On the evening of the 3rd day, while Eric was downstairs in the hospital cafeteria getting coffee, Debra asked Nicole to sit. "I want to talk to you about something," Debra said. "Not about my knee." Nicole hesitated. She preferred clinical conversations. Clinical conversations had boundaries and protocols and outcomes that could be measured. Personal conversations were minefields. "Of course," Nicole said, settling into the chair beside the bed. "What is on your mind?" "You remind me of someone," Debra said. Her tone was casual, conversational, like she was discussing wallpaper options rather than dropping a depth charge into the center of Nicole's carefully constructed facade. Early in my relationship with Eric, when he had had too much wine, he would sometimes mention a woman he had been married to. He never said her name, but the way he described her. She paused, studying Nicole's face with the attention of someone examining a paint swatch. Passionate, stubborn, the kind of person who made you want to be better even when you resented her for it. I always wondered what happened to her. Nicole's hands went still on the blood pressure cuff she had been preparing. The room became very quiet. Outside, the hospital continued its constant hum of activity. Machines beeped. Footsteps passed in the corridor. Somewhere on the floor below, a child was crying. The world kept moving, while Nicole stood perfectly still and felt the walls she had spent 5 years building begin to vibrate. She said nothing, but the silence was louder than any confession could have been. Debra watched her for a moment longer, then smiled gently and changed the subject. "When is my next round of exercises? I want to be able to walk without the crutch before the engagement party next month." Nicole exhaled. She picked up the blood pressure cuff. She wrapped it around Debra's arm with hands that did not shake, because she would not allow them to shake. "Not here, not in front of this woman, not in front of anyone. Tomorrow morning we will increase your weight-bearing intervals," Nicole said. Her voice was steady, professional, giving nothing away. "You are progressing ahead of schedule." But inside, behind the armor, something was coming loose. A bolt she had thought was welded permanently into place was beginning to turn, and Nicole did not know if she could tighten it back before the whole structure started to fail. That evening, Nicole took her break in the small courtyard behind the hospital. It was the only outdoor space on the property that was not visible from patient rooms. She stood under the magnolia tree that had lost its blossoms weeks ago and pulled out her phone and called home. Renata answered on the second ring. The sounds of Nicole's apartment filled the speaker. Water running, small voices arguing about something trivial with the passionate intensity that only children can bring to trivial arguments. "They are fed and bathed," Renata reported. "Jonah wants to show you the bridge he built from popsicle sticks, and Mira wants you to know her soccer team won today, and she scored the winning goal." "Put them on," Nicole said. "Mama." Mira's voice came through the phone, like sunlight breaking through a hospital window. "We won 6-4, and I scored twice, and Coach Patterson said I have natural talent, and can I please have ice cream tomorrow because winners get ice cream." Winners absolutely get ice cream, Nicole said, and the warmth in her voice was so different from the clinical tone she used inside that anyone listening would have thought they were hearing two different women. I am so proud of you, baby. Thanks, Mama. Here is Jonah. He is being weird about his bridge again. I am not being weird. Jonah's voice replaced Mira's. He had Eric's cadence, the same deliberate pacing, the same way of treating every statement like a fact that had been verified before delivery. I am being precise. There is a difference. Mama, did you know that the Golden Gate Bridge uses cables that contain 80,000 miles of wire? I read about it today. I did not know that, Nicole said. That is incredible, baby. It is, Jonah agreed. I want to build bridges when I grow up. Big ones. Ones that connect things that are far apart. Nicole closed her eyes. The metaphor was so precise it felt like the universe was writing dialogue for her 4-year-old. That sounds like a perfect job for you, she said. Be good for Aunt Renata. I will be home in the morning. I love you more than all the stars. More than all the stars, both children echoed in unison. It was their ritual, their sacred text, the words that sealed every goodbye with the promise that distance was temporary but love was structural. She ended the call and stood in the courtyard breathing the cool evening air. And that was when she heard his footsteps behind her and knew, without turning around, that Eric had followed her outside. The confrontation was not loud. That is the thing people misunderstand about real emotional devastation. It is not screaming and throwing things. It is two people standing 3 feet apart in a hospital courtyard, speaking in voices barely above a whisper, and the whispers carrying more weight than any shout ever could. Nicole, Eric said. Do not, she replied. She did not turn around. Please. I need to. You do not need anything from me. You forfeited the right to need things from me 5 years ago. Were you on the phone with them? Your children? Now she turned, and the look on her face was something Eric had never seen before. Not anger, not grief, something beyond both. Something forged in 5 years of fire. Do not you dare ask me about my children. Our children. His voice broke on the word, our. Nicole, I heard you on the phone. Let me talk to your brother. Both of you. Twins. They are twins. The word hung between them like smoke. Are they mine? They are mine, Nicole said, and she delivered the words she had been carrying like stones in her pockets for half a decade. Every one of them. The solo pregnancy, the solo birth, the fevers and first words and first steps she had witnessed alone, the mornings and nights and years of building something from nothing, while the man who should have been there was somewhere else being comfortable. Eric stood there and absorbed it all. Every word, every accusation. He did not defend himself. He did not explain. He did not try to rewrite the narrative or shift the blame or do any of the things powerful men typically do when confronted with the consequences of their choices. He just stood there and let it hit him. All of it, like standing in the rain without an umbrella and understanding that you deserved to be soaked. When Nicole finished, the silence was so heavy it felt like the courtyard had sunk 3 feet into the earth. Their names, he whispered. Please, just tell me their names. Nicole cracked. Not broke. Cracked. She told him. Jonah and Mira. She described them in sentences that were simultaneously the most generous and most devastating things she could have offered. Jonah looks like you. Mira has your stubbornness. They are 4.5. They are everything. And they do not know you exist. Then she pulled her wrist free and walked back inside. Eric did not follow. He stood under the magnolia tree and stared at the sky and felt the weight of 4.5 years of missed mornings settle onto his shoulders like concrete. He stayed in that courtyard for 20 minutes. When he finally went back inside, Nicole was adjusting Debra's medication as though nothing had happened. Her hands were steady. Her voice was calm. Her armor was back in place, seamless and impenetrable. Eric looked at her and understood for the first time the true cost of what he had done. Not the divorce, not the loneliness, the fact that this woman had learned to function flawlessly while her entire world was on fire. She had become unbreakable because breaking was a luxury she could not afford, and he had made that necessary. His cowardice had forged her strength. His absence had built her armor. She was magnificent, and she was damaged, and both things were his fault. The next 2 days passed in excruciating normalcy. Nicole cared for Debra with unwavering professionalism. Eric visited during appropriate hours. They did not speak to each other except when medical necessity required it. Two people orbiting the same room with the practiced precision of planets that must never touch. But the secret was becoming unstable. Nicole could feel it. The careful compartmentalization she had maintained for 5 years was developing fractures. Being in the same building as Eric every day, hearing his voice, smelling his cologne, watching him hold Debra's hand with the same fingers that had once held hers. It was erosion. Slow, constant, wearing away at walls that had seemed permanent. On the 5th day, the fracture became a fault line. Nicole was in the break room during her afternoon pause, organizing her nursing bag, reviewing notes for Debra's afternoon exercises. She pulled out a folder, and a photograph slipped free. It fell face up on the table. Jonah and Mira at their preschool graduation ceremony, wearing tiny caps and enormous grins. Jonah standing straight and serious, trying to look dignified. Mira mid-laugh, her cap askew, one shoe untied. Nicole reached for it immediately, but not immediately enough. Eric was standing in the doorway. He had come to find her, to try again to talk, to beg for information about children he had just learned existed. Instead, he found something more powerful than any conversation could have been. He saw the photograph. He saw his own face looking back at him. Twice. Jonah's jawline, Mira's eyes, the way they both tilted their heads slightly to the left, a gesture so precisely Eric's that genetics felt less like science and more like indictment. He did not speak. He just stared. And in that stare was every milestone he had missed, every birthday candle he had not helped blow out, every bedtime story he had not read, every scraped knee he had not bandaged, every first day of school he had not photographed. 4.5 years of fatherhood compressed into a single image of 2 children in graduation caps who did not know his name. Nicole tucked the photograph into her bag. Their eyes met, and in that moment, both of them understood that the wall between past and present had cracked beyond repair. The only question now was what would emerge from the rubble. That night, Eric could not sleep. He lay in the penthouse he shared with Debra and stared at the ceiling and counted backward. 5 years, 9 months, the last time he and Nicole had been together. The math was irrefutable. The children were his, not because of a photograph or a phone call overheard in a courtyard, because of time, because of biology, because of the obvious unavoidable truth that he had spent 5 years not seeing because he had never looked. He opened his laptop. He searched for any trace of Nicole's life over the past 5 years. There was almost nothing. She had been deliberately invisible. No social media presence, no public records beyond professional certifications. She had erased herself from the world Eric inhabited with the thoroughness of someone who never wanted to be found. But he found one thing. A local newspaper article from 2 years ago. A Nursing Excellence Award at Charlotte General Hospital. The article included a photograph of Nicole receiving a plaque. The caption read, "Nicole Harmon, orthopedic rehabilitation specialist and devoted single mother of twins, receives the annual Nightingale Award for outstanding patient care." Single. Mother. Of. Twins. Eric closed the laptop. He sat in the dark for a long time. And then he did something he had not done since the night his father died when he was 19 years old. He cried, not the performative tears of a man seeking sympathy. Real tears. The kind that come from a place so deep you did not know it existed until it broke open. He cried for the children he had never held, for the woman he had destroyed, for the 5 years of mornings he could never get back, for the man he had been and the man he should have been, and the enormous, devastating distance between the two. When the tears stopped, something else took their place. Not a plan exactly, a clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you stop lying to yourself and look at the wreckage honestly for the first time. He had to tell Debra. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, before another day passed in this elaborate performance of a life that was built on silence and avoidance. But he could not tell her in the hospital. That would be cruel. He waited until she was discharged 2 days later. Waited until she was settled in the penthouse comfortable, her rehabilitation progressing well enough that the conversation would not jeopardize her physical recovery even as it demolished everything else. Then, he told her everything. He sat across from her in their living room, the room she had designed with the same impeccable taste she brought to everything, and he dismantled it all with words. He told her about Nicole, about the marriage, about the elevator and the terrible pasta and the sticky notes on the refrigerator and the slow drift and the texts and the night he left, about the twins he had just discovered, about standing in a hospital courtyard while the mother of his children told him they did not know he existed. Debra listened. She did not interrupt. She did not cry. She held her coffee cup with both hands and listened with the stillness of someone watching a building she designed being demolished in real time. When he finished, the silence lasted a long time, long enough for the coffee to go cold, long enough for the light in the room to shift as the sun moved behind a cloud. Then Debra set her cup down with the careful precision of someone placing the final piece in a puzzle they wished they had never started. "You still love her," Debra said. "I do not know what I feel." "Yes, you do. You have known since she turned around in my hospital room. I saw it on your face. I thought you looked ill. But you did not look ill, Eric. You looked found, like someone who had been lost for years and suddenly recognized where they were. Debra, I care about you. I know you do. The way you care about beautiful things. Carefully, from a safe distance, never quite touching." She paused. She looked around the room she had designed. The perfect furniture, the perfect art, the perfect proportions, all of it a reflection of the relationship itself, aesthetically flawless and emotionally vacant. "I have spent 2 years being your safe distance, Eric. Your comfortable choice. You're Debra, and I think we both deserve more than comfortable." "I am sorry," Eric said. The words were inadequate, and he knew it, and he said them anyway, because there was nothing else to say. "I know you are," Debra replied. "But sorry does not undo the fact that you let me build a future with a man who was still living in his past. I deserve to make that choice with all the information. You took that from me the way you took choices from Nicole, by deciding on your own what people should and should not know. That is not protection, Eric. That is control." He flinched. The accuracy of her assessment was surgical. Debra continued, "I want to tell you something, and I need you to hear it." She met his eyes. "I knew about the marriage. I found the old marriage certificate 3 months ago in your office files. I did not say anything because I convinced myself it was the past, and the past did not matter." Eric went very still. "I chose not to see it," Debra said, "because seeing it meant questioning everything. And I did not want to question everything. I wanted the life we were building to be real. I wanted us to be enough." She set her coffee cup down. "But wanting something does not make it true. And I will not spend the rest of my life being the woman you settled for because the woman you loved was too difficult to deserve." She removed her engagement ring, not with anger, not with the theatrical gesture of a woman making a point. She removed it the way you remove a bandage from a wound that is healed enough to face the air. Carefully, with the understanding that exposure was necessary even when it stung. "I am not your villain," Debra said, placing the ring on the table between them. "And Nicole is not your victim. You are not the hero of this story, Eric. You are the lesson. The question is whether you are going to learn it or just keep repeating it with different women in different rooms." She stood. She gathered her coat and her purse and the dignity she had never lost even as everything around her collapsed. "One more thing," she said from the doorway. "Do not make the same mistake with Nicole that I made with you. Do not choose blindness over truth. She has children, your children. They deserve a father who chose them on purpose, not a man who stumbled into responsibility because he got caught. If you go to her, go because you have actually changed, not because you are lonely. Loneliness is not transformation. It is just the weather that follows the storm." She left. The door closed softly behind her, and Eric sat in the perfectly designed living room of a perfectly designed life that had just been revealed as perfectly empty. "Now I need to pause here and talk to you directly, because this moment, Debra Langford walking out of that penthouse with her ring on the table and her head held high, that is not a small moment. That is the kind of courage most people never find. How many of you right now are sitting in a relationship where you know you are the comfortable choice, the safe option, the person who is good enough to keep but never enough to truly choose? How many of you have looked at your partner and seen them looking at a screen or staring out a window and known, really known, that they were somewhere else? With someone else? In a life they chose not to live because it was too hard, or too real, or too demanding. Debra saw it, and instead of pretending, instead of redecorating the lie to make it more beautiful, she walked away. She chose herself, and that took more strength than anything Eric Collins has done in this entire story. Drop a comment right now. Tell me, have you ever been the Debra in someone's story? The person who loved honestly and discovered the honesty was not returned? Share this video with someone who needs to hear that knowing your worth sometimes means walking away from someone who does not. And if you have not already, hit that like button, because the next part of this story, when Eric has to face Nicole without Debra, without excuses, without anything except the truth of who he is and who he failed to be, that is where everything changes. Let me tell you what happens when a man who has spent his entire life avoiding discomfort finally walks toward it. Eric spent 3 weeks after Debra left in a state that looked from the outside like functioning but felt from the inside like drowning in slow motion. He went to work. He attended meetings. He signed documents and approved budgets and made decisions that affected thousands of employees. The machinery of wealth continued to operate because it was designed to operate without requiring its operator to be emotionally present. But every evening, after the office emptied and the city lights came on, and the silence of the penthouse pressed against him like a physical weight, Eric drove. He drove past an address his investigator had found, a modest duplex in a neighborhood full of bicycles and chalk drawings on the sidewalk, and the evidence of lives being lived at ground level rather than from the 42nd floor. He never knocked. He parked across the street and watched the windows and hated himself for watching because it felt like surveillance when what he wanted was connection. But he did not know how to connect. He had never known. That was the original problem, the foundational flaw in the architecture of Eric Collins. He could build empires, but he could not build bridges. One morning, he arrived early enough to see them. Nicole walking out the front door with a child on each side. Jonah carrying a backpack shaped like a rocket ship. Mira skipping and singing something Nicole kept correcting with gentle patience. They walked toward the school 3 blocks away. Nicole held Mira's hand. Jonah walked independently beside them, maintaining the careful distance of a child who wanted to be close but also wanted to be seen as capable of walking alone. Jonah's walk was Eric's walk, the same measured stride, the same slight forward lean, the same way of watching the ground 2 steps ahead, as if planning the most efficient route. Seeing his own body language replicated in miniature by a child who had never seen him walk, who had learned that cadence from genetics rather than observation was the most disorienting experience of Eric's life. More disorienting than the elevator moment. More disorienting than the courtyard. Because this was not about Nicole, or about their history, or about what he had done. This was about a boy who moved through the world carrying pieces of a father he had never met, and a girl who skipped through the same world carrying the stubbornness Nicole had warned him about. The stubbornness that was undeniably his own. He watched them until they rounded the corner. Then he sat in his car and gripped the steering wheel and made a decision. 3 days later he went to the hospital. Not to room 714. Nicole's assignment there had ended when Debra was discharged. He went to the nursing administration desk and asked if Nicole Harmon was working that day. She was. He asked if she could meet him in the cafeteria when she had a moment. The receptionist relayed the message. He waited in the cafeteria with 2 cups of coffee that went cold while his courage gathered itself in increments too small to measure. She came. She sat across from him with the wariness of someone who had learned that hope was the most dangerous thing a person could carry. She wore her lavender scrubs. Her badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. Her hair was pulled back in the same low twist. She looked tired. She always looked tired. That was what 5 years of single parenthood did. It wrote exhaustion into your face like a second language. Debra and I ended things, Eric said. 3 weeks ago. Nicole's expression did not change. That is not my concern. I know. I am telling you because I want you to understand. I am not here as someone juggling obligations. I am here as someone who finally stopped running. People do not stop running, Eric. They just get tired. Maybe. But tired people can still choose differently. What do you want? To know them. Jonah and Mira. To know my children. The words changed the air between them. Nicole looked down at her hands. Those steady, capable, extraordinary hands. When she looked up, her eyes were wet, but nothing fell. She had trained herself not to let things fall in front of people who had once made her fall apart. You do not get to waltz in and be a hero, she said. Her voice was low and fierce. You do not get to buy them things and show up on weekends and call yourself a father. Fatherhood is the 3 a.m. fevers and the impossible homework and the days when they hate you for saying no. It is not a role you audition for when it becomes convenient. I know that. Do you? Because 5 years ago, you could not even handle being a husband. What makes you think you can handle being a parent? Because 5 years ago, I was afraid of becoming someone real. I am not afraid anymore. I'm just late." Nicole was quiet for a long time. Around them, the cafeteria hummed with the ordinary sounds of people eating and talking and living their unshattered lives. A doctor laughed at something a colleague said. A janitor pushed a mop across the floor in long rhythmic strokes. The coffee machine hissed. The world continued, while two people sat across from each other, negotiating the terms of a future they had never planned for. "Saturday," Nicole said finally, 10 o'clock. "There is a park near our house. Henderson Park. I will bring them. You will meet them as someone Mama knows from work. Nothing more, nothing less. If you overwhelm them, if you confuse them, if you make one single promise you cannot keep, you will never see them again. Do you understand me?" "I understand. You understand nothing yet, but you might learn." She left without touching her coffee. Eric sat there for another hour. His hands were shaking again. But this time, the trembling felt different. Not fear, not shock. Something closer to the vibration a building makes when its foundation is being reset. The structure was unstable. The outcome was uncertain. But for the first time in 5 years, Eric Collins was building something that mattered. Saturday arrived wrapped in the kind of autumn sunlight that makes everything look like a photograph someone took on purpose. Henderson Park was small but well maintained. A playground with swings and a climbing structure and a sandbox that had been recently filled. Benches lining a walking path. Trees beginning to turn, their leaves shifting from green to gold with the slow determination of things that know their time is limited but intend to be beautiful anyway. Eric arrived 40 minutes early. He sat on a bench near the playground and watched other families with the desperate attention of someone studying for an exam he had already failed once. A father pushing his daughter on a swing. A mother helping her son across the monkey bars. The ordinary, unremarkable, sacred rituals of parenthood happening all around him while he sat alone on a bench, waiting for the chance to participate in something he should have been part of since the beginning. He saw them before they saw him. Nicole walking across the park with a child on each side, holding their hands. Her face was different here, outside the hospital, away from the armor she wore at work. It was softer, open, lit from within by the kind of love that does not perform because it does not need an audience. Mira was pulling against Nicole's hand, straining toward the swings with the impatient energy of a child who considered standing still a waste of perfectly good momentum. Jonah walked at his mother's pace, scanning the park with methodical attention, cataloging every detail the way his father cataloged balance sheets. Nicole spotted Eric. She stopped for a moment. The pause lasted less than a second, but contained within it every fear and hope and doubt she had been carrying since she agreed to this meeting. Then Mira tugged her hand and said something that made Nicole smile despite herself. And they kept walking. Jonah, Mira. Nicole's voice was steady when they reached the bench. "This is Mr. Collins. He is a friend of Mama's from the hospital." "Hi," Mira said immediately. She assessed Eric with eyes that were entirely Nicole's. Dark, direct, missing nothing. "Do you like swings?" "I do," Eric said. His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by the magnitude of this small, ordinary, world-altering moment. "Very much." "Push me?" Mira asked. The request was so simple, so uncomplicated, so free of the weight that every adult interaction carried. A child asking a stranger to push her on a swing because swings were fun. And pushing was better than pumping your legs, and why would you not ask for help when help was standing right there? Eric looked at Nicole. She gave the slightest nod. Permission granted in millimeters. "I would love to," he said. Mira grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the swings with a strength that seemed impossible for someone who weighed 40 pounds. She climbed onto the seat with practiced efficiency and looked over her shoulder. "Higher than Mama pushes," she instructed. "Mama is too careful." Eric pushed her. Gently at first, then higher as her laughter demanded it. The sound of her laughter was the single most beautiful thing he had ever heard. More beautiful than any deal closing or market bell ringing or champagne cork popping in celebration of another billion, added to a number that meant nothing. His daughter was laughing. His daughter, a person who existed because of him and in spite of him, who carried his genetics and Nicole's resilience, who did not know she was laughing with her father and did not need to know because the laughter was enough. Jonah hung back. He sat on the bench next to Nicole and watched his sister and this tall stranger with the analytical caution of someone who needed more data before forming a conclusion. After several minutes, he stood and walked to the sandbox. He began constructing something with the focused precision of an engineer who happened to be 4.5. Eric noticed. He waited until Mira declared she was done with swings and wanted to try the monkey bars, then walked to the sandbox and crouched beside Jonah. "What are you building?" Eric asked. "A bridge," Jonah said without looking up. His small hands shaped the sand with careful attention. He had already created 2 supports on either side of a dugout channel. "The Golden Gate. Bridge uses suspension cables. I'm trying to figure out how to do that with sand, but sand does not suspend well." "It does not," Eric agreed. "Sand works better for compression structures. Arches, for example. Roman aqueducts used arches because the compression distributed weight evenly across the curve." Jonah looked up. For the first time, his expression shifted from caution to interest. "You know about bridges?" "A little. I studied structural engineering in college before I switched to business." "Why did you switch?" "Because I thought business was more important." "I was wrong. Bridges are more important. They connect things." Jonah considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Then he nodded once and returned his attention to the sandbox. "Help me build an arch," he said. "But I am the lead architect. You are the assistant." "Understood," Eric said. And for the next 30 minutes, he took directions from a 4-year-old boy who spoke with the quiet authority of someone who knew exactly what he wanted and expected the world to provide it. They built an arch bridge in the sandbox. It collapsed twice. Jonah analyzed the failures with clinical detachment and instructed Eric on modifications. The 3rd attempt held. "That is structurally sound," Jonah announced, examining their work from multiple angles. "Good job, Mr. Collins." "Thank you, Jonah. You are an excellent architect." "I know," Jonah replied, not with arrogance, with the simple factual certainty of a child who had been told by his mother every day of his life that he was extraordinary and had no reason to doubt it. From across the playground, Nicole watched. She sat on the bench with her arms crossed and her heart doing things she had specifically instructed it not to do. She had told herself this meeting was about the children, about their right to know their father, about the factual, biological, undeniable truth that Jonah and Mira deserved access to the other half of their origin story. She had not told herself it would look like this, like a tall man in jeans and a plain shirt crouching in a sandbox taking instructions from a 4-year-old. Like someone who had once run a corporation worth billions following the directions of a child with sand in his hair, and the same jawline and the same focused expression, and the same slight furrow between his eyebrows. The visit lasted 2 hours. They left the sandbox eventually, and moved to the climbing structure where Mira insisted on demonstrating her ability to cross the monkey bars without help. She made it halfway before her grip slipped and she fell. Eric was there before her feet hit the ground. He caught her, not gracefully. He practically dove across the wood chips and caught her against his chest, and they both tumbled slightly and Mira's knee scraped the ground, but only barely. She looked at him through the beginning of tears that were more surprise than pain. "You came really fast," she said. "Of course I did," Eric replied. And the simplicity of that exchange, the automatic, instinctive, unplanned act of catching a child who was falling, meant more than any speech or promise or grand gesture ever could. He had not thought about it. He had not calculated it. He had simply moved toward his daughter because she was falling and catching her was the only thing that mattered. Nicole watched from across the playground, and something shifted in her chest. Not the crack from the courtyard. Something different. Something quieter and more dangerous. The first, tentative, terrifying stirring of belief. The belief that maybe, possibly, the man kneeling in the wood chips holding her daughter was not the same man who had walked out of their apartment 5 years ago. Maybe, possibly. She was not ready to commit to more than that. But maybe and possibly were more than she had allowed herself in a long time. When it was time to leave, Mira hugged Eric's leg without warning. A quick, fierce squeeze that lasted 2 seconds and rearranged every molecule in his body. "Bye, Mr. Collins. You are nice. Bye, Mira. You are extraordinary." She beamed and ran to Nicole. Jonah approached more formally. He extended his hand for a handshake, small fingers disappearing inside Eric's larger palm. "You are an acceptable assistant," Jonah said. "We can build again next time." "I would like that very much," Eric managed. His voice was not steady, but Jonah did not seem to notice or did not seem to mind. Nicole lingered after the children had moved toward the path. "Next Saturday," she said quietly. "Same time, same rules. Thank you," Eric whispered. "For this, for them, for surviving what I did to you well enough to raise 2 extraordinary humans." "Do not thank me," Nicole said. "Prove you deserve them. She walked away, one child on each side, his whole world moving across a sunlit park in mismatched jackets and sneakers that had seen better days. On the third Saturday, something happened that changed everything. The visits had settled into a rhythm. Park, sandbox, swings, lunch at the picnic tables where Jonah arranged his food by category and Mira talked enough for all four of them. Eric was careful. He followed Nicole's rules without deviation. He arrived on time. He left when she indicated the visit was over. He did not push. He did not overstep. He existed within the boundaries she had drawn with the careful obedience of someone who understood that those boundaries were the only reason he was allowed to be there at all. But on the third Saturday, while Mira was drawing with chalk on the sidewalk and Nicole was sitting with her across the playground, Jonah sat next to Eric on the bench and was quiet for a long time. Eric waited. He had learned that Jonah's silences were not empty. They were processing. They were the quiet before a question that would cut through everything. "Are you our father?" Jonah asked. The question landed in the space between them like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spreading outward in every direction. Eric looked across the playground. Nicole was watching. She had sensed the shift, the way she always sensed shifts. The way she sensed changes in a patient's vital signs before the monitors registered them. Their eyes met across 30 feet of playground. She gave the slightest nod. "Yes," Eric said. "I am." Jonah did not react immediately. He sat with the information, the way he sat with engineering problems, turning it over, examining it from multiple angles, testing its structural integrity. "Why were you not here before?" Jonah asked. "Because I made a very bad mistake when I was younger. Not about you. I did not know about you, but I made a mistake with your mom. I hurt her, and she left to protect herself and to protect you, and I did not know you existed until very recently. That is a lot of mistakes for one person," Jonah observed. "It is. More than I know how to fix." Jonah was quiet again. Then he said something that Eric would remember for the rest of his life. Something that a 4-year-old boy said on a park bench on a Saturday morning that contained more wisdom than anything Eric had heard in any boardroom or board meeting or business seminar in his entire career. "My mom says you cannot fix broken things back to how they were, but sometimes you can build something new from the pieces, something different. Your mom is the smartest person I have ever known," Eric said. Jonah nodded. He agreed with this assessment. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "She cries sometimes, at night. She thinks we do not hear, but I do. I think she cries about you." The words slid between Eric's ribs and found something vital. He had no response. Some truths do not come with answers. They just come with weight you have to learn to carry. People who stay get colors. People who leave stay blank. Those were not Jonah's words. Those came later. On the 5th visit, from Mira. She brought Eric a drawing she had made at school. 4 figures, a tall woman with dark hair, 2 small figures in the middle, and a tall man standing slightly apart from the group. The woman and children were colored in vivid, bold shades. The man was outlined but empty, just lines, no color. "Why does he not have color?" Eric asked. "Because I do not know what color you are yet," Mira said. She spoke with the matter-of-fact certainty of a child delivering a verdict. "You have to earn your color." "How do I earn it?" "By staying. People who stay get colors. People who leave stay blank." Eric looked at the drawing. 4 figures, 3 in color, 1 in outline. The entire story of his failures and his possibilities captured in crayon on construction paper by a 4-year-old girl who understood more about human worth than most adults learn in a lifetime. He took the drawing. He folded it carefully and put it in his wallet. He carried it every day. He would carry it for the rest of his life. A reminder that belonging was not something you could purchase or demand or inherit. It was something you earned, one day at a time, one kept promise at a time. One act of showing up at a time. People who stay get colors. He intended to earn his. Now, I need to pause one more time. Because that line, people who stay get colors, people who leave stay blank, that is not just a line in a story. That is a mirror. And right now, I need you to look into it. Who in your life has earned their color? Who showed up when it was hard, when it was inconvenient, when showing up was the last thing they wanted to do but the first thing you needed? And who is still blank? Outlined in your life but never filled in because they never did the work? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And your stories, your real, honest, complicated stories, they are the reason this channel exists. Mr. Dawson Stories is not just a channel. It is a community of people who believe that broken things can be rebuilt if you are willing to do the work. If this story is speaking to you, subscribe right now. We are building something here, something real. And the final part of this story, where Eric has to prove that his transformation is permanent, where Nicole has to decide whether her walls are protecting her or imprisoning her, where two children teach their parents the lesson that the adults should have learned years ago. That is coming next. Stay with me. We are almost there. And trust me, you will want to see how this ends. The weeks that followed the fifth visit were different. Something had shifted in the architecture of this fragile arrangement. Not dramatically, not with declarations or grand gestures. The shift was tectonic, deep beneath the surface. The kind of movement that rearranges foundations without disturbing the furniture on the floor above. Eric showed up every Saturday, without exception, without delay, without the conditional reliability of a man who keeps his promises only when they are convenient. He showed up in rain and in sun, and on the Saturday morning after he had been awake until 3 a.m, closing a deal that would have consumed his entire attention a year earlier. He showed up tired. He showed up uncertain. He showed up anyway. Nicole noticed. She noticed the way you notice a change in a patient's vitals. Not with fanfare, but with the quiet professional attention of someone trained to detect shifts that other people miss. She noticed that Eric arrived early every Saturday. Not just on time. Early. She noticed that he remembered things the twins said from week to week. Small things. Trivial things. The things that mattered precisely because they were trivial. When Jonah mentioned a library book about suspension bridges, Eric brought a more advanced book the following week. When Mira complained that her purple crayon was too short to draw proper dragons, Eric arrived on Saturday with a set of artist-grade colored pencils that included 6 different shades of purple. He did not hand them over like gifts. He did not present them with the performative generosity of a man trying to purchase affection. He mentioned them casually, as if remembering what a child said and acting on it was simply what people did. As if paying attention was not a grand gesture but a basic requirement of being present. Nicole watched this and said nothing, but something inside her, something she had welded shut with 5 years of determined self-sufficiency, began to warm. Not open. Not yet. Just warm. The way metal warms before it becomes malleable. The change is invisible from the outside, but the molecular structure is already shifting. The video calls started during the 7th week. Eric asked if he could call the twins on Wednesday evenings, not to replace the Saturday visits. In addition to them, Nicole considered the request for 2 days before agreeing. She set parameters, 20 minutes maximum, age-appropriate conversation only. She reserved the right to end the call at any point. The first call was awkward, everyone performing a version of themselves that did not quite fit. Eric asked questions that were too formal. Jonah answered in monosyllables. Mira carried the conversation with the oblivious enthusiasm of a child who did not understand that adults found silence uncomfortable. By the 3rd call, something shifted. Jonah started bringing things to show Eric through the camera. A bridge he had built from toothpicks and glue. A drawing of an arch with mathematical notations that a 4-year-old should not have been able to produce, but somehow did. A rock he found at school that he believed contained a fossil. "Is that sedimentary?" Eric asked, leaning toward his phone screen. "I think so," Jonah replied with scholarly caution. "The layers suggest compression over time, but I need a magnifying glass to confirm. I have one at my apartment. I will bring it Saturday." The magnifying glass arrived on Saturday. Jonah spent 40 minutes examining the rock from every angle, while Eric sat beside him, offering observations that treated a 4-year-old's geological curiosity with the same respect he would give a university researcher. The rock was not a fossil. It was a piece of ordinary limestone with interesting stratification. Jonah was not disappointed. He was delighted. The investigation itself was the point. The process of looking closely at something and understanding what it actually was rather than what you hoped it would be. Nicole observed this from across the room. She was learning something about Eric that she had not known during their marriage. Or perhaps she had known it and had forgotten, or perhaps he had not possessed it then and had only developed it in the years since. The capacity for patience, not the performed patience of a man waiting for a meeting to end. Real patience. The kind that comes from genuinely valuing the moment you are in, rather than rushing toward the next one. Mira's calls were different. She did not bring objects or projects. She brought stories. Elaborate, intricate, impossible stories about a kingdom ruled by purple dragons where every citizen had a specific job and every building was designed by an architect dragon named Professor Scales. Professor Scales sounds like someone I would like to meet, Eric said during one call. You cannot, Mira informed him. He is very busy designing the new wing of the Dragon Palace, but I can tell you about it. The new wing has 17 rooms, and each room is a different color, and the throne room has a ceiling made of crystals that makes rainbows when the sun comes through. That sounds structurally ambitious, Eric said with complete seriousness. It is, Mira agreed. Professor Scales says it is his greatest challenge. Nicole listened from the kitchen doorway and felt her mouth curve into a smile she had not authorized. Eric was engaging with Mira's fantasy world, as though it were a real architectural project requiring real analysis. He asked about load-bearing walls in the Dragon Palace. He questioned whether crystal ceilings could sustain weather events. He treated the imaginary kingdom with the same intellectual respect he brought to Jonah's real-world engineering inquiries. And Mira responded to this respect the way all children respond when adults take them seriously. She expanded, she elaborated. She grew more confident in her creativity because someone was telling her that her ideas mattered, not by saying the words "your ideas matter," which is what most adults do, by actually engaging with the ideas themselves, by treating them as worthy of discussion. 3 months after the first park visit, something happened that Nicole had not anticipated and could not have prepared for. Eric was tested. It happened on a Wednesday, not a Saturday. Wednesdays were phone call days. Eric called at 6:30 as always. Mira answered because she always answered first. She was in the middle of telling him about a soccer game when Jonah's voice cut in from the background. Mama, I do not feel good. Nicole's nursing instincts activated before her maternal ones. She pressed her hand to Jonah's forehead. Warm, too warm. She grabbed the thermometer from the bathroom. 103.4. His breathing was shallow and slightly wheezy. His eyes had that glassy, distant quality that children's eyes get when fever takes hold. Jonah had a history. He had been hospitalized with pneumonia as an infant. His lungs had never fully recovered the resilience they should have had. Every respiratory illness carried a weight of anxiety that Nicole managed with professional calm and private terror. I need to take him to the emergency room, Nicole told Mira. Call Aunt Renata and tell her to come over. But Renata was traveling. A teacher's conference in another state. Her phone went to voicemail. Nicole called twice. 3 times. Voicemail each time. Mira stood in the hallway holding the phone that was still connected to Eric's call. She was scared. Her brother was sick and her mother was worried and Aunt Renata was not answering and the apartment felt too big and too empty for a 4-year-old to stand in alone. Mama, Mira said. Her voice was small. Mr. Collins is still on the phone. He says he wants to help. Nicole was carrying Jonah toward the front door. She had her keys in one hand and her son against her chest and a bag of medical supplies she kept packed for exactly this situation slung over her shoulder. She did not have time to argue. She did not have the emotional bandwidth to debate the implications of what she was about to do. Tell him Mercy, General, she said. Emergency entrance. I need someone to stay with Mira. Eric arrived in 18 minutes. Nicole would learn later that he had broken 7 traffic laws and would receive 4 camera tickets in the mail. She did not learn this because he told her. She learned it because the tickets arrived at his apartment and Renata, who had become the unofficial auditor of Eric's behavior, somehow acquired the information and reported it to Nicole with grudging respect. He ran through the emergency room entrance, still wearing the suit he had been in when the phone call started. He found them in the pediatric waiting area. Nicole was with Jonah behind the triage curtain. Mira was sitting in a plastic chair in the hallway, her knees pulled to her chest, her face doing the thing children's faces do when they are trying very hard to be brave and not quite succeeding. Eric sat down next to her. He did not speak immediately. He did not offer false reassurance or empty comfort. He sat beside her and waited until she was ready. Is Jonah going to be okay? Mira asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. Your mama is with him, Eric said. And your mama is the best nurse in this entire hospital. She is going to take care of him. But what if she cannot? What if he is really sick? Then the doctors will help. That is what they do. And your mama will make sure they do it right because she knows exactly what Jonah needs. She always does. Mira was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned against Eric's arm, not into his lap, not a full embrace, just a lean, a slight transfer of weight from her own small body to his larger one. The physical equivalent of a child saying, "I am too tired to hold all of this fear by myself. Can you hold some of it for me?" Eric put his arm around her. He held her against his side, and Mira closed her eyes and let someone else carry the weight for the first time in her memory. Jonah's fever was caused by a respiratory infection, not pneumonia, not the worst-case scenario that Nicole's professional knowledge had been constructing since she first touched his forehead. The doctors administered medication and fluids and breathing treatments. Within 2 hours, his fever had dropped to 101 and his breathing had steadied. He was asleep. Nicole sat beside his bed monitoring his vitals with the dual attention of a nurse who knew what the numbers meant and a mother who needed them to mean that her son was safe. She emerged from the treatment area at 10:45 in the evening. The hallway lights had been dimmed to the amber half-darkness that hospitals adopt after visiting hours, the color of institutions trying to pretend that rest is possible in a place designed for crisis. She found Eric asleep in the plastic chair with Mira curled against his chest. His jacket was draped over her like a blanket. Mira's face was pressed against his shoulder. One of her hands gripped the lapel of his shirt, the way children grip things they do not want to lose. Nicole stood in the doorway and looked at them. She stood there for a long time. She did not move. She did not speak. She let herself see what she was seeing without the filter of anger or suspicion or the protective certainty that this man could not be trusted. What she saw was a man who had driven across the city in 18 minutes because a child needed him. A man who had sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair for 4 hours holding a scared little girl because there was no one else to hold her. A man who had not asked for credit or acknowledgement or gratitude. A man who had simply shown up because showing up was what the moment required. And for the first time in 5 years, Nicole cried in front of someone. Not sobbing, not the dramatic release of accumulated grief. Silent tears that ran down her face and fell onto the scrubs she was still wearing from her shift that morning, a lifetime ago. She cried standing in a hospital hallway that smelled like antiseptic and fear, and something else she could not identify. Something that smelled like the possibility that she had been wrong. Not about leaving. Leaving had been right. Not about protecting the twins. Protecting them had been necessary. But wrong about the belief that no one would ever show up. Wrong about the certainty that she had to carry everything alone. Wrong about the wall she had built between her children and the man who was currently holding one of them like she was the most precious thing in the world. Eric woke up. He saw Nicole standing in the doorway. He saw the tears on her face. He said nothing. He did not comment on them or draw attention to them or make the mistake of treating her vulnerability as an invitation to move closer. He simply extended his free hand toward her. An offering, not a demand. A bridge between two people who had spent 5 years on opposite sides of a chasm he had created. She did not take his hand, but she did not leave either. She stood in that doorway and let the tears fall and let him see them falling, and that, for Nicole Harmon, was the bravest thing she had done since the night she sat on the kitchen floor and decided to survive. The months that followed were a slow, careful reconstruction, not of their relationship. Nicole was not ready for that conversation, and Eric had the wisdom not to initiate it. The reconstruction was of trust, the most delicate architecture there is, more complex than any bridge or skyscraper or billion-dollar development. Trust between two people who had broken each other in the specific, devastating way that only people who once loved each other can manage. Eric did not try to accelerate the timeline. He had learned, finally, painfully, that some things could not be optimized or expedited. Some things required the excruciating discipline of doing nothing more than showing up consistently and letting time do the work that words could not. He showed up for Saturday park visits. He showed up for Wednesday video calls. He showed up for Mira's soccer games, standing on the sideline in weather that ranged from pleasant to miserable, cheering with the enthusiastic ignorance of a man who did not fully understand the rules of children's soccer, but understood completely that his daughter wanted him there. He showed up for Jonah's school science fair. He spent 3 weekends helping Jonah build a model suspension bridge that won second place. Jonah was initially devastated by not winning first. Eric sat with him on the front steps of the school and said something that Nicole overheard and would remember for a long time. "Second place means your bridge was almost the best," Eric said. "Do you know what makes the difference between almost the best and the best?" "Better engineering?" Jonah guessed. "Better failure analysis," Eric corrected. "The kid who won first place did not have better ideas than you." He had better information about what did not work. Every bridge that falls down teaches you something the bridges that stay up cannot. The question is not whether you fail. The question is whether you learn from the failure or let it stop you from building. Jonah considered this. His face did the processing thing. Eyebrows together, mouth to one side. So, losing is just research? Jonah asked. Losing is data, Eric confirmed. And data is the most valuable thing an engineer can have. Nicole stood behind them, ostensibly checking her phone, actually listening to every word. And the thing she felt, the complicated, terrifying, unwelcome thing she felt, was recognition. This was the Eric she had fallen in love with 7 years ago in a broken elevator. The one who paid attention, who made people feel seen, who brought intelligence to every interaction without making it feel like a performance. She had thought that version of him was gone, destroyed by his own choices, buried under the rubble of the marriage he had demolished. But here he was, sitting on school steps, teaching their son about the value of failure with the kind of wisdom that comes only from having failed catastrophically and survived it. People could change. The evidence was sitting in front of her, talking to their son about suspension bridges. But evidence was not proof, and Nicole Harmon had learned the difference between evidence and proof in the hardest way possible. 6 months after the first park visit, the conversation Nicole had been avoiding finally arrived. Not because Eric initiated it, because she did. Because the walls she had built for protection had begun to feel less like shelter and more like confinement. Because the woman who had spent 5 years insisting she needed no one was beginning to realize that needing no one and choosing to let someone in were not the same thing. It happened on a Tuesday evening, not a Saturday. Saturdays were structured, controlled. Tuesdays were ordinary, and ordinary was where the real conversations lived. The twins were asleep. Eric had come for dinner, something that had started happening with increasing frequency. He cooked, not because Nicole asked him to, but because he had taken cooking classes. Actual classes, with an apron and a chef instructor, and the humbling experience of being the worst student in a room full of retired grandmothers who could julienne vegetables with their eyes closed. He made pasta. It was good, better than the terrible pasta Nicole used to make in their old apartment, a fact that Nicole acknowledged with raised eyebrows and grudging approval. They sat in the kitchen after dinner. The dishes were done. The apartment was quiet with the specific silence that descends when children are asleep and the adults who love them are finally free to exist as something other than parents. "I need to say something," Nicole said. She held a cup of tea with both hands, not because it was cold, but because her hands needed something to hold, something solid and warm and under her control. Eric waited. He had learned to wait. It was perhaps the most important thing he had learned in 6 months. "I do not hate you anymore," Nicole said. The words came slowly, each one examined before release, as though she were performing surgery on her own emotional history and needed to be precise about which parts to remove and which parts to preserve. "I want to. It would be easier. Hatred is clean. It is a wall you can lean against without worrying it will give way. But watching you with them, seeing how you have changed, how you remember everything they say, how you show up even when it is raining and the park is muddy and Mira's in a mood and Jonah is silent, I cannot maintain hatred in the face of that." She paused. She took a breath. She continued, "That does not mean I trust you. It does not mean I have forgiven you. It means I have decided to stop punishing you for who you were so I can see who you are becoming. Those are different things." Eric absorbed this with the careful attention of someone receiving a gift they know they do not deserve. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. "I am not working toward a specific outcome between us. I am working toward being someone my children can respect. And if that is all this ever is, if I am only ever their father and never anything more to you, that will be enough. Because they are enough. They are more than enough. They are everything." Nicole studied his face. She was looking for performance, for the careful construction of words designed to produce a specific emotional response. She had seen that face perform before. She knew what it looked like when Eric Collins was managing an interaction rather than inhabiting one. She did not find performance. She found something raw and less polished. She found a man who meant what he was saying and was afraid that meaning it was not enough. "You counted their mornings," Nicole said. It was not a question. Eric blinked. "What?" "When you told Jonah about failure at the science fair, you said something about showing up. But before that, weeks ago, you said something to me about missing mornings. You said you had counted them." 1,642 mornings. I counted every morning since they were born that I was not there, Eric confirmed. It is the only way I can understand the weight of what I lost, what I caused us all to lose. Numbers make abstract things concrete, and the abstraction of missing your children's childhood needed to be concrete because I did not want to ever minimize it. Not to myself, not to them, not to you. Nicole set down her tea. She looked at this man sitting in her kitchen, in the apartment she had built without him, in the life she had constructed from the wreckage of the life he had destroyed. She looked at him and she made a choice. I am not ready to forgive you, she said. I may never be, but I am ready to stop holding the door closed. I am ready to see what happens if I let it open. Not for romance, not for the fairy tale ending that people expect when they hear stories like ours. For honesty, for the possibility that two people who failed each other can build something that does not require either of them to forget what happened, but does not require them to be defined by it forever either. She took a breath. I am terrified, she added. You should know that. I am more scared right now than I was the night I gave birth alone. Because that night, the worst had already happened. It was just a matter of surviving it. This is different. This is choosing to hope. And hope is the most dangerous thing I know how to feel. I am terrified too, Eric said. Every single day. Terrified I will say the wrong thing or push too hard or not push enough. Terrified that one morning I will wake up and you will have decided I have not earned it. Terrified of the mornings I already missed and the ones I might still miss if I get this wrong. Then we are both terrified, Nicole said. And maybe that is the right way to start something real. Not with confidence, with fear. Because fear means you understand what is at stake. And what is at stake here, Eric, is everything. Our children, their stability, my sanity, your soul, frankly. Everything. The conversation did not end with a kiss. It did not end with an embrace. It ended with Nicole saying goodnight at the door, and Eric walking to his car, and both of them sitting alone in separate spaces, feeling the same impossible combination of terror and possibility and the fragile, stubborn, irrational belief that maybe, just maybe, two people who had survived the worst of each other could build something from the wreckage that was stronger than what came before. It took 3 more months. 3 months of dinners and park visits and school events and the slow, unglamorous, deeply unsexy work of building trust from the ground up. 3 months of conversations that started carefully and ended honestly. 3 months of Eric proving through repetition rather than declaration that he was not going anywhere. Nicole agreed to a dinner. Not a family dinner. Not a dinner with the twins present. A dinner for 2. Just them. Sitting across from each other in a restaurant that neither of them had any history with. New territory. Neutral ground. Elena, a neighbor Nicole had befriended, stayed with the twins. Mira was thrilled by the concept of her parents going out together. She called it a grown-up date and spent 30 minutes helping Nicole choose earrings, a process that involved trying every pair Nicole owned and rejecting all of them before circling back to the first pair she had suggested. These ones, Mira declared, holding up simple silver hoops. They make you look like yourself, not like you are trying to be someone else. When did you become a fashion consultant? Nicole asked. I have always been a fashion consultant, Mira replied. You just were not listening. Eric arrived at the restaurant early. He stood when Nicole walked in. Not because social convention demanded it, but because the sight of her, in a dark green dress she had not worn in years, her hair down for the first time since he had reappeared in her life, her eyes carrying equal parts courage and caution, made sitting impossible. Hi, he said. Hi, she replied. They sat. They ordered. And then they did something they had not done in nearly 7 years. They talked, not about the children, although the children wove through every topic because that is what happens when you are a parent. The children are the thread that runs through the fabric of your existence. You cannot separate yourself from them, and you would never want to. They talked about who they had become. Eric told her about the therapy he had started. Real therapy. Not the performative kind where you pay someone to tell you that you are fine. The kind where you sit in a room and dismantle yourself piece by piece and examine the wreckage and figure out which parts are worth keeping and which parts need to be rebuilt from scratch. I learned something in therapy, Eric said. Something that sounds simple but changed everything. He paused. I learned that I chose Debra because she did not require me to grow. And I left you because you did. You asked me to become someone better and I was too afraid to try. So I found someone who would let me stay exactly as I was. And staying the same felt like comfort, but it was actually decay. I was rotting in place, Nicole. Beautifully. Expensively. But rotting. Nicole listened. She did not respond immediately. She let his words settle into the space between them and examined them the way Jonah examined rocks, looking for authenticity, testing for structural integrity. I learned something too, she said after a while, not in therapy, in motherhood. I learned that strength and isolation are not the same thing. I thought they were. For 5 years, I believed that needing no one was the ultimate achievement. That independence was the highest form of power. But independence taken to its extreme is just loneliness with better branding. I was alone, Eric. Completely alone. And I told myself it was a choice when really it was a scar. You scarred me into solitude. And I wore the scar like a badge, because wearing it was easier than healing it. They talked for 3 hours. The restaurant emptied around them. The staff cleared tables and restacked chairs and made the polite sounds that service workers make when they would like you to leave but are too professional to say so. It felt different than it had 7 years ago. Less electric, less urgent, more grounded. They were not two young people intoxicated by attraction and mistaking intensity for intimacy. They were two adults who had survived heartbreak and built separate lives, and were now choosing carefully, deliberately, with full knowledge of the risks, to see if those separate lives might fit together, not merge, not collapse into each other the way they had before. Fit, the way two well-constructed buildings can share a foundation without compromising each other's structural integrity. The months that followed were not a montage. They were a construction project, slow, methodical, full of setbacks and adjustments, and the constant recalibration that happens when you are building something designed to withstand the specific stresses that destroyed the previous structure. Eric relocated his primary operations to the city, not with a dramatic announcement, with a quiet restructuring that moved decision-making authority to his executive team in New York, while he opened a satellite office 15 minutes from Nicole's duplex. He rented a 2-bedroom apartment instead of a penthouse. He furnished the second bedroom for the twins, not elaborately, thoughtfully. Jonah's room had bookshelves and a drafting table, and a lamp positioned to catch morning light. Mira's room was painted lavender with space for her growing dragon kingdom, and a window seat where she could read and draw and imagine worlds where everyone stayed. The twins began spending weekends at Eric's apartment. Nicole allowed this in stages. Saturday afternoons first, then Saturday overnights, then full weekends, arriving Friday after school and returning Sunday evening. Each expansion was negotiated carefully, with Nicole assessing the twins' emotional response after every visit before agreeing to extend the arrangement. They were happy. That was the undeniable, irreducible truth that Nicole could not argue with. Her children were happy in a way that included something she could not provide no matter how hard she tried. The something that a father provides, not better than what a mother provides. Different. Complementary. The other half of an equation that Nicole had been solving alone for 5 years with remarkable success but undeniable incompleteness. Jonah built things with Eric. Bridges and towers and elaborate structures that filled Eric's apartment with the evidence of a relationship being constructed in miniature. Every toothpick bridge and popsicle stick skyscraper was a metaphor neither of them acknowledged but both of them understood. We are building something, piece by piece, and this time it will hold. Mira drew things for Eric. The drawings evolved over time. The 4 figures that had started with one blank outline gradually changed. More color appeared. The tall man figure moved closer to the group. The gap between him and the others narrowed in increments that tracked precisely with Mira's growing trust. A year after the first park visit, Eric's figure in Mira's drawings was fully colored in, bold, vivid, unmistakably present. She brought the drawing to dinner one Sunday evening. The 4 of them were at Nicole's kitchen table. Eric had cooked. Pasta again, but a different recipe. Better. He was getting better at everything, which was what happened when you practiced something with genuine commitment rather than just going through the motions. Mira slid the drawing across the table to Eric. He picked it up. He looked at it. And his face did something Nicole had only seen once before, on the night in the courtyard when she told him the twins' names. It collapsed. Every wall and defense and carefully maintained composure fell away, and what was left was just a man looking at a piece of construction paper that told him he belonged. "You earned your color, Dad," Mira said. "It took a long time, but you stayed." Eric pulled her into a hug. He held her against his chest and pressed his face into her hair, and did not speak, because speaking was impossible when your throat had closed around the largest emotion you had ever felt. Over Mira's shoulder, his eyes found Nicole's across the kitchen. She was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching them with an expression he had spent a year learning to read. The expression that meant her walls were down, but she was not quite ready to announce it. The expression that meant the woman behind the armor was closer to the surface than she had been in 5 years. She mouthed 2 words. "You stayed," he mouthed back. "I'm not going anywhere." Jonah, who had been observing this exchange with his characteristic analytical attention, spoke from his seat at the table. "Can we watch the documentary about Roman aqueducts now?" "You promised." "Coming," Eric said. He pressed a kiss to Mira's forehead. He folded the drawing carefully and placed it in his wallet beside the first one. The blank one. He would carry both for the rest of his life, the before and the after, the outline and the color, the evidence of who he had been and the proof of who he had become. They moved to the living room. Nicole sat on the couch. Eric sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. She did not move away. He did not move closer. They existed in that precise proximity, close enough to feel each other's warmth, not so close that the contact became a question requiring an answer. The documentary played. Jonah asked questions about Roman engineering with an intensity that suggested he was considering a career in ancient infrastructure. Mira fell asleep within. 20 minutes, curled against Eric's other side, her hand resting on Nicole's knee, connecting them in the unconscious way that children connect the people they love. It was ordinary. It was mundane. It was boring in the specific way that family evenings are boring. The kind of boring that people who have lost everything and rebuilt it from nothing understand is actually the most precious thing in the world. Nicole leaned her head against Eric's shoulder. The gesture was small, almost accidental, the kind of movement that could be attributed to tiredness or gravity, or the simple physical reality of 2 bodies sharing a couch. But both of them knew it was not accidental. Both of them knew it was the first time in 5 years that Nicole had voluntarily moved toward Eric rather than away from him. And the significance of that movement, that tiny shift measured in inches and trust, was larger than any deal Eric had ever closed, or any building he had ever funded, or any empire he had ever built. "We did okay," Eric said quietly. His voice was almost a whisper, careful not to wake Mira. "Didn't we?" "We did better than okay," Nicole replied. "We did something real, messy and imperfect and absolutely real. We took the worst thing and built something better from it." He looked at her. She looked at him. And in that look was not the fire of their early relationship, not the desperation of attraction, not the blind intoxication of 2 people who mistook intensity for love. This was something deeper, quieter, harder earned. This was 2 people who had seen each other at their absolute worst and chosen, after everything, to believe in each other's best. "I love you," Eric said. The words were simple, unadorned, free of performance or persuasion. Just 3 words delivered in a living room while a documentary about ancient water systems played in the background and 2 children slept nearby. The least romantic setting imaginable for a declaration that carried the weight of 7 years of history and 5 years of absence and 12 months of patient, terrifying reconstruction. "I love you too," Nicole replied. Again, still, against my better judgment, and in spite of everything you did, and because of everything you have become, I love you in a way that is completely different from how I loved you before. Harder, less naive, more honest. I love you with my eyes open this time. And I need you to understand that this version of love is not going to be easy or comfortable or convenient. This version requires you to keep showing up. Every day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard, because I will not survive losing you twice, Eric. I will not survive it, and our children will not survive it. And if you are not certain, if there is any part of you that is doing this out of guilt or obligation or the romantic notion that love conquers everything without effort, then tell me now. Tell me before I let you any further in. I am certain, Eric said, not because I deserve to be, but because I have spent a year learning what certainty actually means. It does not mean the absence of fear. It means the presence of commitment that is stronger than the fear. I am afraid every day. Afraid I will let you down. Afraid I will let them down. Afraid I am not enough. But the fear does not make me run anymore. It makes me stay, because staying is the only thing that has ever mattered, and I spent too many years not understanding that." Nicole looked at him for a long moment. Then she took his hand. She interlaced her fingers with his the way she had not done in 5 years, the way she had sworn she would never do again. And the contact, palm against palm, her skin against his, was simultaneously the most ordinary and most courageous thing she had ever done. The story did not end there. Real stories never end. They continue in school mornings and bedtime negotiations and the 1,000 small disagreements about homework and screen time, and whether Mira can paint her bedroom ceiling purple. They continue in the hard conversations that happen after the children are asleep, when two adults sit in a quiet kitchen and do the ongoing, unglamorous, absolutely necessary work of maintaining a relationship that was rebuilt from rubble. Eric and Nicole did not get a fairy tale. They got something better. They got a second chance that was earned through failure and pain and the relentless, stubborn decision to show up even when showing up was the hardest thing in the world. They got the kind of love that is not a feeling but a practice, a daily choice. A bridge built from the same materials that once collapsed, redesigned with better engineering and a deeper understanding of where the stress points are. Jonah grew up to study structural engineering. He kept every bridge he and Eric ever built, displayed on shelves in his room like trophies. On the day he was accepted to university, he told Eric something that Eric carried with him forever. "You taught me that broken things can be rebuilt," Jonah said. "Not back to what they were, better. Because you understand the failure points now. You know where the weakness is, so you reinforce it. That is what you did with us, with Mom. You found the failure points in yourself, and you reinforced them. That is the best engineering I have ever seen." Mira grew up to be an artist. She never stopped drawing dragons. She never stopped coloring the people she loved in bold, vivid, unmistakable hues. And in every drawing, every painting, every piece of art she created throughout her career, there was a figure standing within the group, not apart from it. Not outlined and empty, filled in, present, colored with the permanence of someone who had earned their place. Nicole eventually forgave Eric, not all at once, not in a single cathartic moment of release. In layers, in stages, in the slow accumulation of mornings where she woke up and he was still there, still present, still choosing them. Forgiveness, she learned, was not about excusing what happened. It was about refusing to let the past hold the future hostage. It was about recognizing that the man sleeping beside her was not the man who had walked out the door 5 years ago. That man was gone. This man had been built from the same materials but with a different blueprint, a better one that included the understanding that love without presence is just a word, and presence without consistency is just a visit. Eric carried both of Mira's drawings in his wallet until the day he died, the blank one and the colored one, the before and the after. The evidence and the proof, and every time he opened his wallet, every time he caught a glimpse of construction paper worn soft from years of handling, he remembered the lesson his daughter had taught him at 4 years old. People who stay get colors. People who leave stay blank. He stayed, every single day, through difficulty and monotony and the 1,000 invisible tests that life administers to people who have promised to show up. He stayed through arguments about money and disagreements about parenting, and the Tuesday evenings when staying was boring, and the Wednesday mornings when staying was hard, and the Thursday nights when staying required him to choose his family over his ambition for the 100th time, and choose them without hesitation, because he had learned, finally, permanently, at the cost of 5 years and 1,642 mornings, that the things worth having are the things you build by hand. Slowly, patiently, with fear in your chest and your children's drawings in your wallet, and the stubborn, irrational, hard-earned belief that broken things can be made whole again if you just show up long enough to prove you deserve to be part of the picture. He earned his color. That is not a fairy tale. It is not a Hollywood ending with orchestral music and a slow-motion kiss in the rain. It is better than that. It is real. It is the kind of ending that happens in kitchens and living rooms and school parking lots. The kind that is built from 1,000 ordinary moments that only become extraordinary when you look back and realize that every single one of them was a choice to stay, a choice to show up, a choice to be present even when presence is painful and absence would be easier. People who stay get colors, and that is the whole story. That is the only story that has ever mattered. Before you go, I need to ask you something, not for me. For the person who has not found this video yet, the person who is sitting somewhere right now, alone, wondering if people can really change, wondering if the person who hurt them could ever become someone worth trusting again. wondering if they will ever stop feeling blank. Your like makes this video visible. Your share puts it in front of someone who needs it. Your comment, your real, honest, complicated story about staying or leaving or earning or forgiving, that transforms this from a video into a conversation, and conversations are where healing starts. If Mr. Dawson's Stories has become a place where you feel something real, subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Be here for the next story, because every story we tell on this channel is designed to do one thing: to remind you that the worst thing that ever happened to you does not have to be the last thing that defines you. I am Mr. Dawson. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying. You have earned your color.